Hey gang, welcome back. My name is Nail, and I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Gotta promise not to tell, okay? But I really like Dungeons and Dragons. So today we're going to be doing some character creation. Keep that on the DL though, okay? Today we are going to be running through some character creation. I've been sort of perusing through Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which has been out for a little while now, and I wanted to create this character that I've been kicking around for a minute. Thought I would take you guys along for the ride. So without further ado, let's roll that intro. Wait, we don't have an intro? This is the first time I'm doing this? God, why do I have to do everything myself? Okay, well, so there's no intro. I guess I'm just gonna roll for it and we'll see how it goes. Yeah, that was a 3. We're talking D&D, baby. That's the best intro that 3 is gonna get. I'm sorry, the dice decided, but let's get into it. So I've been reading through Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I've found some really cool, different subclasses that were added in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. One of the ones that I think stood out to me the most is the Circle of Wildfire Druid. I've never played a druid before. Druids always sound fun, but there's never anything that really pulled me in to the class itself. However, having a little wildfire spirit sounds incredible. So today, we're going to be creating a Circle of Wildfire Druid. Anytime I create a character, I like to just pick a jumping off point. So for this, we're picking the class first, and then we will sort of develop everything on the back of that class. So make sure that it fits thematically and is something that we are going to enjoy playing in the future. So, reading through the Circle of Wildfire subclass. Druids within the Circle of Wildfire understand that destruction is sometimes the precursor of creation, such as when a forest fire promotes later growth. These druids bond with a primal spirit that harbors both destructive and creative power, allowing the druids to create controlled flames that burn away one thing but give life to another. One of the cool things that they added in, they gave you an expanded spell list, which sort of doubles down on the theme of being this druid who commands fire, which I think is really cool. So looking at the expanded spell list, at 2nd level, you get Burning Hands and Cure Wounds, both of which are very good for low level play. At 3rd level, you get Flaming Sphere, Scorching Ray. At 5th level, you get Plant Growth and Revivify. At 7th level, you get Aura of Life and Fire Shield. At 9th level, you get Flame Strike and Mass Cure Wounds. This is a pretty dope expanded spell list. Definitely gives us a lot more of that fire sort of theme and takes this druid in a different direction than the normal druid that you would play, which I really like that. I wish that it had fireball or something like that, but can't get everything that we want. All right, so the next 2nd level feature is Summon Wildfire Spirit. This is easily my favorite part of the entire subclass, and it's what drew me to it the most, because who doesn't love having a little companion running around with you? The Summon Wildfire Spirit, you can summon a primal spirit bound to your soul. As an action, you can expend one use of your Wild Shape feature to summon your Wildfire Spirit rather than assuming a beast form. The spirit appears in an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you. Each creature within 10 feet of the spirit, other than you, when it appears, must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC or take 2d6 fire damage. The spirit is friendly to you and your companions and obeys your commands. See this creature's in-game statistics in the Wildfire Spirit stat block, which uses your proficiency bonus in several places. You determine the spirit's appearance. Some spirits take the form of a humanoid figure made of gnarled branches covered in flame, while others look like beasts wreathed in flame. And then we have the wildfire spirit stat block here. It's immune to fire, of course. It is also immune to being charmed, frightened, grappled, prone, or restrained conditions. It has dark vision of 60 feet, which is pretty awesome. Its actions are Flame Seed, which is a ranged weapon attack. Your spell attack modifier to hit with a range of 60 feet. It's one target you can see, and it does a 1d6 plus your proficiency bonus of fire damage, which is pretty awesome because you do use your bonus action in order to command the spirit to do something. So just getting an extra 1d6 plus 2 or 3 or 5 is just a nice little bonus. They also have fiery teleportation. The spirit and each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it teleport up to 15 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see. Then each creature within 5 feet of that space that the spirit left must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against your spell save DC, or take 1d6 plus your proficiency bonus in fire damage, which is freaking awesome. That's so cool. You get that at level 2. So this already is such a cool little companion that you get. When you summon it, it does 2d6 fire damage to anything within 10 feet of it, which is awesome. And then on your bonus action, you can either attack one thing and get that extra 1d6 plus your proficiency bonus, or you can just teleport out. And there's no limit on the amount of creatures. As long as they're within 5 feet, you can just bring your entire little squad 15 feet away, sort of get out of dodge, and it leaves that 1d6 in the vicinity as well, which is pretty awesome. In combat, the spirit will share your initiative count, and it takes its turn immediately after yours. The only action it takes on its turn is the dodge action, unless you take a bonus action on your turn to command it to take another action. That action can be one in its stat block or some other action. So some other action would be like the help action or something like that, which is all outlined in the player's handbook. If you're incapacitated, the spirit can take any actions of its choice, not just the dodge action. The spirit manifests for 1 hour or until it is reduced to 0 hit points, until you use this feature to summon the spirit again, or until you die. So yeah, level 2, you're kind of already coming in stacked. I love the expanded spell list, and I love this little wildfire spirit. I think that's so cool. Then at level 6, you get enhanced bond. The bond with your wildfire spirit enhances your destructive and restorative spells. Whenever you cast a spell that deals fire damage or restores hit points while your wildfire spirit is summoned, you roll a d8 and you gain a bonus equal to the number rolled to 1 damage or healing roll of the spell. In addition, when you cast a spell within a range other than self, that spell can originate from you or your wildfire spirit. So I think that's really cool too. So if you are going to cast Cure Wounds, you get a roll a d8 and you add that on to your healing roll for that spell, so it just gives you a little extra at level 6, which is pretty sweet. And this happens for any spell that deals fire damage or restores hit points while your wildfire spirit is summoned. So in combat, that's going to be super useful. It's not just you add it to one spell and then you can't use it again until a short rest or a long rest. It's there the entire hour that your wildfire spirit is there, which I think is pretty sweet. All right, so next we have the level 10 feature, which is Cauterizing Flames. You gain the ability to turn death into magical flames that can heal or incinerate. When a small or larger creature dies within 30 feet of you or your wildfire spirit, a harmless spectral flame springs forth in the dead creature's space and flickers there for 1 minute. When a creature you can see enters that space, you can use your reaction to extinguish the spectral flame there and either heal the creature or deal fire damage to it. The healing or damage equals 2d10 plus your wisdom modifier. You can use this reaction number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses whenever you finish a long rest. So this is super helpful if you don't have a reliable healer in your group and you just want to make sure that the party is staying alive. You can use that to sort of resurrect your party members and give them a pretty 2d10 is a fairly good chunk of healing to sort of get them back into the fight. It's better than like just a level 1 cure wounds or anything, and you get that a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So that's pretty nice to just sort of have a good utility and make sure that you're serving your party well. And then if you do have a healer in your group who's already sort of taking over that job, you can either help cover or you can just turn this into extra damage, which is super nice. And then finally, we have the level 14 feature, Blazing Revival. The bond with your wildfire spirit can save you from death. If the spirit is within 120 feet of you, when you are reduced to 0 hit points and thereby fall unconscious, you can cause the spirit to drop to 0 hit points. You then regain half of your hit points and immediately raise to your feet. Once you use this feature, you cannot use it again until you get a long rest. So that's super awesome. You do have to wait till level 14 to get that feature. So you may not get to spend a lot of time with it, especially considering most campaigns don't tend to continue to high levels. But if you do make it to level 14, that's awesome. You get to use your wild shape feature in order to summon the wildfire spirit. Once you get up to level 14, you're going to have quite a few wild shapes. So giving up essentially one wild shape in order to bring yourself back from the dead with half of your hit points, which at level 14 is a pretty serious chunk. That's awesome. I don't think it's necessarily game breaking or super insane, but it's definitely a cool feature if you get up to that level. We now have a general idea of what the Circle of Wildfire Druids do and how they're going to play mechanically. So now what I like to do to sort of fill in all the extra gaps is to come up with ideas that fit the theme of a wildfire druid. When I think of druids, they're always outdoorsy. Personally, I always think of like high fantasy, like elves or things like that. And when I think about more outdoorsy things, I also think of like halflings or even like gnomes or something. So if we think about just general tropes, which tropes are never a bad thing. They definitely can get tired and worn out, but I think using them as sort of a jumping off point or a guideline is very helpful. In this case, the trope of this outdoorsy druid is definitely going to fit thematically, sort of a guardian of the forest. But we do want to put our own little spin on it. If I think about outdoorsy types, I also think of the trope of like a hermit, somebody who is more isolated and just sort of enjoys nature, sort of the quiet pace of life. And going from that, I think if we start diving into other tropes or characters that we like that might fit those archetypes, the first one that comes to mind for me is Bilbo Baggins in Lord of the Rings. And the idea of somebody who's just kind of hanging out and very content with their life, who then gets sort of swept up in adventure, I think is a lot of fun. This reluctant adventurer, right, who ends up growing along the way and finding a life outside of their world. And this is where we sort of bump some of the tropes and we pick up different ones, and you're able to mix and match. A lot of the times, adventurers are normally spawned from these terrible circumstances, right? Like, everybody in my family died, or there was some great war, and blah, 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 which are all very cool. The whole loner, edgy sort of ranger druid ideas are always a lot of fun. But I do think I want to switch this up just a little bit and make them a lot more mundane, where they're honestly really happy with where they are. I think I would then go the direction of maybe like a gardener, maybe somebody who just likes to be outside and tend to their garden. They just live a very, very mundane life, and they somehow get sucked in to adventure, maybe meeting this wildfire spirit. As long as we're going along with tropes, like the movie Brave, where she gets pulled into the forest because of the will-o-wisps. We have this sort of general idea, this reluctant adventurer, this mundane sort of person. Next, what I would do is I would pull up a character sheet for them. We have our wildfire druid, and then we have our mundane reluctant adventurer idea. So there's quite a few races in D&D now. If we're gonna go mundane, you can't get much more mundane than a human. So let's go on and select a human. And what we're actually gonna do for this one, I think, is we wanna go to a variant human. Being able to pick up a +1 to 2 ability scores in exchange to get a feat, I think is very, very strong. Feats are really cool, so let's go on and pick that up. Next, we're going to go on and pick a language. So I don't think that they've really gotten out very much, so they wouldn't know any sort of crazy languages. I do like the idea of them, maybe like if if they're more this like hermit or just sort of this homebody, maybe they've learned a language by like reading, so their like accent is probably terrible, and they're not very good, but they're at least passable. So I think I would pick something like Dwarvish, just like a very easy, relatively common language. Next, we want to pick our ability scores. So the most important ones for a druid is going to be wisdom. That's going to be our spell casting. We definitely want to make sure that we have a good wisdom. And then second, you can do dexterity if you want to make sure that your initiative is always up there and you're moving around. I like going constitution personally, just because I like getting extra hit points and feeling a little bit tankier. And next we pick a skill, animal handling. Yep, well, let's just go on and click that one. All right, so next is our feat. So I have given this a little bit of thought. One of the things that I like the most about the Wildfire Druid is the Summon Wildfire Spirit, right? I understand why. Mechanically, I do think that it needs that hour time limit. However, I really like the idea of having a companion all the time. So I think what I'm actually going to do is we're going to pick up Magic Initiate for the wizard. So what this feat will do is it lets us learn 2 cantrips from the wizard spell list. And then in addition, we get a first level spell that we can cast once per long rest. And these would use intelligence as the spell casting ability. And the reason why I want to pick this is for this first level spell. The first level spell that I am going to choose is Find Familiar. That way we can get a little woodland companion to run around with us all of the time. From a DM perspective, I would allow the sort of Summon Wildfire Spirit to sort of combined with the Find Familiar. So when you cast Find Familiar, it would just be sort of your normal familiar running around. But then if you want to expend that wild shape use, then it would essentially just layer on top of the current familiar that you have, and then they would sort of like burst into flames. And then during that hour that you would have the Wildfire Spirit, you would get access to all those things. Then once that hour is done, it would go back to just being your normal familiar. Obviously, that's a little bit of a, I just really like the flavor of it. So if you want to try doing this, that's definitely something you'd have to talk to your DM specifically about. But the other big boon of picking up this feat is that we can also pick up Firebolt, which is one of the best cantrips in terms of damage dealing in the entire game, and thematically, it fits so well for our Wildfire Druid. So we don't have to be relying on our expanded spell list and our spell slots in order to get that theme rolling. We always have a little Firebolt that we can start shooting around. And this definitely is a build that is more going to be RP heavy, more about what thematically makes sense for the character, not necessarily min-maxing or what's best in slot or any of that type of stuff. That's definitely fun. I enjoy doing that sometimes. If that's something that you want to do, I 100% support it, but unfortunately that's not the character that we're building now. All right, so next we are going to do our ability scores. I always like using point buy. Anytime I run a game, I use point buy just because it gives you a little bit more depth into sort of your build diversity. You get to really pick what you want where and what's good and what's bad. You can tank some stats in order to raise others rather than just the standard array. I don't like the rolled stats personally, just because from a party dynamic, it always feels really bad if one person rolls really, really well and another person doesn't roll well. Then like the person who doesn't roll well sort of gets stuck feeling like they're just wading through the campaign, where the other person is sort of skiing on top of everything. To avoid any of that, we're just going to do point buy. All right, so starting off, we want to make sure that we throw our wisdom up high. All right, and then constitution, let's throw that at 13. So we do have Firebolt, which is attached to our intelligence. So let's throw this up to there. They're a hermit. They don't really need to be charismatic. So let's give them some dexterity, and then they can just be sort of run-of-the-mill, nothing too crazy on the charisma. They're not strong. We have all of our abilities here. Next is the description. And we're thinking about the sort of foundation of this backstory we already have. We have this very mundane human who's a reluctant adventurer who gardens and enjoys being outside. And then they find this sort of woodland creature companion. All right, so let's think about different woodland creatures. When you think about the woods, you have like rabbits. Rabbits are a really cool one. Foxes. I believe the art for the Wildfire Druid is a wildfire fox. Just sort of this fox made out of fire, which is really cool. You'd have owls, raccoons, squirrels, different things like that. But I really like the idea of having a squirrel. Reluctant adventurer, gardener who finds a squirrel. So next, I like to think about what are some of the connections that this character would have. And honestly, I really like the idea, if we're doing this very like mundane gardener, reluctant adventurer, Bilbo Baggins sort of old soul type of character. Maybe they are a grandparent who they're empty nesters, right? They sort of just live alone in their little house, and they're content to tend to their garden, and they just sort of wait around for their kids to come by with the grandchildren. I think that idea is really fun. So we'll give them a family, and they really care about their grandchildren. They love interacting and playing with their grandchildren, and they have this little squirrel companion that's just so neat and cool. Now next we have to sort of make some more connections. We have to figure out where their feet comes from, and we have to figure out what pulls them out to a life of adventure. So there has to be a reason why they are a magic initiate and why they are going out on this adventure. Thinking about the current connections that they have this family. Maybe they live in a small town, so they're not completely isolated. They're not a total hermit. If we want to even double down on sort of the Lord of the Rings idea, we could have maybe a festival is happening in their small little town, and the family comes in, the grandchildren come in, and in that festival there is a wizard, and the wizard sort of captivates the small children with their displays of magic. In Lord of the Rings is where the fireworks and things like that, Gandalf, right? So we could do that, where this grandparent sort of watches their grandchildren get just absolutely enraptured with this wizard. Maybe the grandparent gets a little bit jealous, and they want to learn some of that magic. So they can create some sort of rapport with this wizard, and they learn a little bit of magic. That's how they get their feet. Next, we want to come up with a reason for adventuring. We want to figure out what drove them from their cozy hearth out into the wilds to seek adventure. With this, we can stray further down the path of wanting to entertain their grandchildren. Maybe this is a grandparent who feels like they never really did anything with their life. All they have to show for it are their kids, their grandkids, and their garden, which they all love those things. But now seeing the grandchildren sort of looking up to these adventurers and wanting to hear these stories and different ideas, maybe this character takes it upon themselves with their little squirrel companion by their side. They decide that they want to start a life of adventuring in order to gather stories to bring back to their grandchildren, which I think is kind of fun. I like this idea a lot. So now we have pretty much all of the staples of our character creation. We have our class, we have our race, we have our abilities, we have our background, and we have a general idea of our backstory, along with our connections and our bonds, the things that are important to our character, and why they are really being driven into this life of adventure. So I think the only thing really left to do is to name the character. This is one of the hardest parts of the entire character creation. I always have an issue with it. It's naming. We have to name our character. So what I like to do, the entire way that we've sort of created this character, right, is we pick one thing and then we just sort of springboard off of it. For the name, we're going to springboard off of them being a sort of mundane grandpa. I just went and Googled top names of the 1930s to get some good grandpa names. These are the names that I just sort of picked out of the top 200. We have Wilbur, Delbert, Gilbert, Virgil. I think Virgil's a little too cool, personally. Willard, Chester, Elmer, Vernon, and Walter. I kind of like the W's in there. Wilbur, Willard, and Walter. Delbert is a strong contender, though. All right, so now I think what is going to really put this over the top is going to be picking the last name, which is honestly going to be much harder. I don't have any sort of shortcut on how to pick the last name. What I like to do is I like to just say their names and sort of make it up as I go along. So we're gonna go with the whole superhero name trope as well. So it's gonna be the same letters. So that gives us a little bit of a jumping off point. So let's see, Delbert. Delbert Digby. Delbert Digby. Delbert Delbert Dingamus. No, Delbert Digsby, I think is a solid. Chester has a little bit more of a affluent. Chester Chaddinghem. Chester Chaddinghem. Chester Chaddinghem. I think that may be a little bit too... Well, we want a simple man. We don't want a fancy... Chester Chaddinghem. That's not... Delbert Digsby is a guy that I could go get an ale with at the local tavern. Chester Chaddingham does not. That's not the vibe we're going for this particular grandpa. So let's see. Elmer is the other one. Elmer Ingleworth. Elmer Ingleworth. E is such a hard, because it's going to end up starting with an I. Like Ingle starts with an I. But Elbert. Elizabeth. No. Elmer. Let's skip it. We'll go to the next one. Vernon. Old Vern Vagigula. Nope. That's not a name. Vern Velvet. Old Vernon Velvet. So this is actually where we could go like Vern Vel something. Vernon Vel Johnson. That's the cop. Nope. Okay. Vernon Vel Wag. Vernon Vel Wag. No. So then we got Wilbur, Willard, and Walter all have a W. Wilbur Wiggum at your service. My top three now. Wilbur Wiggum, Delbert Digsby, Chester Chaddingham. I still think Chester's a little too rich for our blood. Wilbur Wiggum, Delbert Digsby. I like Wilbur Wiggum. So we have Wilbur Wiggum, but then we can't forget to name one other important member of this character, which is going to be our spirit, our little wildfire spirit, our find familiar. I really love animals with goofy names. Food names are fun. I don't like giving animals people names, personally. So let's think of some sort of nonsensical names that fit with our sort of old man, grandpa. What would be a good idea for a grandpa's pet? Grandpa really likes their grandchildren. It's sort of the defining factor of his adventures, right, is going to be he wants stories for his grandchildren. So they're sort of the pushing factor. So let's tie the grandchildren into this pet's name. What if he named his pet something that his grandkids would call him? All right, so we're gonna look up some grandpa nicknames. I was a very boring child and just called my grandpa. I just Googled grandpa nicknames. All right, so we have Gramps. That's not a fun name. Papa, Bumpa, Pawpaw, Peepaw. Ooh, Peepaw's a good one. His grandkids call him Peepaw. I like that. That's a nice Wilbur Wiggum, also known as Peepaw. The idea of a little flying squirrel named Peepaw. Cracked it. That's got to be the one. All right, so we have Wilbur Wiggum and his little flying squirrel companion Peepaw. I absolutely love it. With that, we have a full character ready for play. Starting at level 2, we have Wilbert Wiggum, the Circle of Wildfire Druid, accompanied by his small woodland companion, a flying squirrel named Peepaw. What a fantastic character. All right, and so with that, we've run through every aspect of character creation. We have our class and our subclass. We have our race. We have our feat. We have our abilities. We have our spells and our wildfire spirit slash familiar, who is a flying squirrel named Peepaw. And then we have our backstory of a grandfather who wishes to impress his grandchildren with these fantastical stories after being shown up by a traveling wizard at a carnival that came to his small town. And I think that that is absolutely delightful. Yeah, so thank you for following along with this very long-winded character creation walkthrough where I brought you through my entire sort of thought process on how I create a character. Going for a strong thematic character that is cohesive all the way through, that holds on to this druid outdoorsy sort of trope, brings in some of our favorite fantasy elements, and also puts its own little spin on it where it is definitely our own character, while we are inspired by Bilbo Baggins, or even the start of Lord of the Rings. We have also sort of morphed it into something that can be very sort of wholesome and personal, and should be a lot of fun. I like to think of old Wilbur Wiggum as a bit of a prankster as well. So I think that that could create some very fun party dynamics as well, as you have this sort of older man who's finding his youth and his joy in creating these stories for his grandchildren. And I'm sure as he pursues them, it will all get out of hand and be even more fantastical than you ever imagined. But with that, I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, you can definitely always leave a like. You can leave me a comment if you want me to create another character. If you have any other subclasses that you think look really cool and want to see what my take on them would be, definitely let me know down in the comments. You can also hit the subscribe button if you thought I did well. But otherwise, I will see you next time, gang.